Chapter 21. The night pressed in around Warren Bishop like a living thing, a beast of shadow and wind that seemed determined to swallow him whole. He stumbled forward, each step a battle against the uneven ground and his own exhaustion. The grass beneath his feet whispered secrets he couldn't quite catch, and the sky above was a void so deep and dark it made his head spin to look at it for too long. "Thelma!" he shouted, his voice raw and ragged. The wind snatched the name from his lips, tearing it to shreds and scattering it across the lonely cliff top. "Thelma, where are you?" But there was no answer. There was never an answer. Only the howling of the wind and the distant crash of waves against the unforgiving rocks far below. Warren's heart clenched in his chest, a fist of fear and desperation that threatened to stop his breath entirely. He paused for a moment, trying to get his bearings. The darkness was so complete, so absolute, that he could barely distinguish where the land ended and the sky began. It was like standing on the edge of the world, with nothing but endless night stretching out in all directions. "Christ," Warren muttered, running a hand through his hair. It was slick with sweat and sea spray, standing up in wild tufts that would have made him laugh in any other circumstance. What I wouldn't give for a bloody torch right about now. But wishes were useless things in a place like this. All he had was his own 2 feet and the burning need to find Thelma, to bring her home safe, no matter the cost. Warren took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the salt tang of the sea air. It burned going down, a reminder of how long he'd been shouting, how far he'd come. But he couldn't stop now, not when he was so close, not when Thelma was out here somewhere, alone and afraid. "Right," he said to himself, squaring his shoulders. "1 foot in front of the other, Bishop. She's counting on you." He set off again, each step carefully placed. The ground was treacherous, pockmarked with hidden dips and rises that threatened to send him sprawling with every stride. More than once, he felt the ground begin to slope downward beneath his feet, a subtle warning that he was drawing too close to the cliff's edge. Each time, Warren's heart leapt into his throat. He backpedaled quickly, turning away from the unseen precipice and heading inland once more. The constant danger wore at his nerves, fraying them like old rope. "Thelma!" he called again, his voice cracking on the second syllable. "Can you hear me? Please, darling, give me a sign." But there was nothing but the wind and the waves and the vast, uncaring darkness. Warren's pace quickened, desperation lending speed to his tired legs. He was running now, heedless of the danger, driven by a fear so deep and primal it overrode all reason. "Thelma!" he shouted, again and again. "Thelma, answer me!" His foot caught on something, a rock, a tussock of grass, he couldn't tell, and he went down hard. The impact drove the air from his lungs, and for a long moment all Warren could do was lie there, gasping like a landed fish. Slowly, Warren rose to his feet, ignoring the protests of his battered body, all the while struggling to catch his breath. He began running again, as fast as he could, when a new sound reached his ears. A voice, so faint he thought at first he must be imagining it. Warren skidded to a halt, his chest heaving as he gulped in great lungfuls of the salt-laden air. The wind howled around him, a banshee's wail that seemed to mock his efforts. But beneath it, beneath the crash of waves against the distant cliffs and the rustle of grass beneath his feet, he thought he'd heard something. "Thelma?" he called, his voice hoarse from shouting. "Thelma, is that you?" For a long moment there was nothing. Nothing but the wind and the waves and the pounding of his own heart. Warren closed his eyes, straining his ears against the cacophony of nature. Had he imagined it? Was his desperate mind conjuring phantoms in the darkness? And then, so faint he almost missed it. Help! Warren's eyes snapped open, his heart leaping into his throat. It was real. It was real, and it was close. He outed, turning in a slow circle as he tried to pinpoint the source of the cry. "Keep calling out. I'll find you." The voice came again, stronger this time. "Someone. Anyone. Please help me." It was a woman's voice. Warren was sure of it now. But was it Thelma? The wind distorted the sound, making it impossible to be certain. But it didn't matter. Someone needed help, and by God he was going to provide it. Warren set off at a run, his tired legs protesting the sudden exertion. The uneven ground threatened to trip him with every step, but he pushed on, driven by a desperate hope. "I'm coming," he called as he ran. "Keep shouting. Let me know where you are." The voice responded, a bit louder now. "Please, help me." Warren adjusted his course slightly, angling towards what he hoped was the source of the cries. His lungs burned and his muscles screamed for rest, but he ignored the pain. He'd come too far, endured too much, to falter now. "I'm here," he shouted again. "Come towards my voice." And just like that, the voice was gone. Warren stopped running, bent over, trying to catch his breath. He was straining his ears between each deep gulp of air. Still, he could no longer hear a voice. It was just the wind and waves again. Warren dropped his head in disappointment. He was so sure he had heard a woman's voice. The thought of the old stories of the sirens of the sea crossed his mind. They must have been something much like this. Warren stood atop the windswept cliff, his heart heavy with despair. The endless expanse of darkness before him seemed to mock his efforts, swallowing up any hope of finding Thelma. He raised his eyes to the star-strewn sky, a prayer forming on his lips. "God," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the howling wind. "Please, please help me find her. I can't do this alone." The words hung in the air, carried away by the relentless gale. Warren waited, straining his ears for any sign, any whisper of divine intervention. But there was nothing. Only the wind, only the distant crash of waves against the base of the cliff. His shoulders sagged, the weight of his failure pressing down upon him like a physical thing. He had come so far, endured so much, and yet here he stood, alone in the darkness, no closer to finding Thelma than when he'd begun. "I'm sorry," he murmured, though whether he was apologizing to God or to Thelma, he couldn't say. "I'm so sorry. I've failed you both." Warren closed his eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to overwhelm him. He couldn't give up. Not now. Not when Thelma was still out there somewhere, waiting for him. But oh, how he wanted to. How easy it would be to simply lie down in the grass and let the darkness take him. Warren. His eyes snapped open, his heart leaping into his throat. Had he imagined it? Was his desperate mind playing tricks on him? "Warren, is that you?" No, it was real. It was her voice, carried on the wind like a miracle. "Thelma," he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "Thelma, where are you? Please," the cry came again, stronger this time. "Please, help me." Warren spun in place, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. The wind seemed to come from all directions at once, distorting Thelma's voice and making it impossible to tell where she was. "Keep talking," he called out, already starting to run. "I'm coming. Thelma, just keep calling to me." He set off across the uneven ground, his tired legs protesting the sudden exertion. But Warren ignored the pain, ignored the burning in his lungs and the pounding of his heart. Nothing mattered now except finding Thelma. As he ran, Warren's eyes scanned the darkness frantically, searching for any sign of movement. The landscape was a blur of shadows and deeper darkness, the starlight barely enough to distinguish between earth and sky. And then, off in the distance, he saw it. A flicker of movement, so faint he might have missed it if he'd blinked at the wrong moment. But it was there, and it was moving towards him. "Thelma," he shouted again, changing course to intercept the distant figure. "Is that you? Can you see me?" For a heart-stopping moment there was no response. Warren's pace faltered, doubt creeping back in. Had he imagined it? Was he chasing shadows and wind? But then, blessedly, came the reply. Yes, I can see you." Relief flooded through Warren, giving him a second wind. He pushed himself harder, running faster than he'd thought possible on this treacherous terrain. The figure in the distance was growing clearer now, resolving into a recognizable silhouette. As he drew closer, details began to emerge from the darkness. Long hair, whipping wildly in the wind. The outline of a clothes, tattered and torn. And then finally, a face he would know anywhere, even in this near-total darkness. "Thelma?" Warren breathed, his voice choked with emotion. "Oh God, Thelma." They were close now, so close. Warren could see the tears streaming down Thelma's face, leaving tracks in the dirt and grime that covered her skin. He could see the way she stumbled as she ran, exhaustion evident in every movement. And then suddenly, there was no more distance between them. They collided with enough force to knock the breath from Warren's lungs, but he hardly noticed. All he could focus on was the solid, real presence of Thelma in his arms, alive and whole and here. They went down in a tangle of limbs, rolling across the damp grass. They both stopped crying, trying to catch their breath. They both began to giggle, which after a moment turned into a huge laugh. As the laughing subsided, Warren cupped Thelma's face in a hand. The two were so close their noses almost touching. "Well, Mrs. Bishop, couldn't you wait until we got back to our room?" Warren asked jokingly. Thelma gasped, slapping Warren on the chest. Warren, grimacing in pain, muttered, "Ouch! That hurt." "Good," Thelma laughed. The laughs didn't last long, though, as they both thought of what they had just been through. Thelma began to cry. Warren could feel her body shaking with sobs, could hear her gasping his name over and over again. For a long moment, they simply clung to each other, too overwhelmed for words. The wind howled around them, but Warren barely heard it. All that mattered was Thelma, safe in his arms at last. Finally, Thelma pulled back slightly, just enough to look up at him. Even in the darkness, Warren could see the tracks of tears on her dirt-smudged face, could see the mixture of relief and disbelief in her eyes. "You came for me," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "You actually came for me." Warren managed a watery chuckle, brushing a strand of tangled hair from her face. "Of course I did," he said. "Did you think I'd leave you out here all alone?" Thelma's laugh was half sob. "I didn't know what to think," she admitted. "I was so scared, Warren. I thought I'd never see you again." Warren tightened his arms around her, as if he could somehow shield her from the memory of her ordeal. "Never," he said fiercely. "I will always come for you, Thelma. Always." They lapsed into silence again, simply holding each other as the wind raged around them. Warren knew they needed to move, to get somewhere safe and warm, but for now he couldn't bring himself to let go, not when he'd come so close to losing her forever. As the initial shock of their reunion began to fade, Warren became aware of the state Thelma was in. Her clothes were dirty and torn, hanging off her frame in tatters. Her hair was a tangled mess, matted with dirt and what looked horribly like dried blood. And beneath the dirt and grime, he could see the beginnings of bruises forming on her exposed skin. Anger flared in Warren's chest, hot and fierce. Whoever had done this to Thelma would pay. He would make sure of it, but that was a concern for later. Right now, Thelma needed him. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently, running his hands over her arms and shoulders, checking for injuries. "What did they do to you, love?" Thelma shook her head, burying her face in his chest. "I'm all right," she mumbled. Just tired, so very tired." Warren nodded, understanding. The adrenaline that had carried him this far was beginning to ebb, leaving him feeling hollow and drained. But they couldn't rest yet. Not here. Not now. "We need to get off this cliff top," he said, peering into the darkness. "It's not safe here. Do you think you can walk?" Thelma nodded, though Warren could feel her trembling against him. I think so. Just don't let go of me, please." "Never," Warren promised, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I'm never letting you go again." Slowly, carefully, they got to their feet. Thelma swayed slightly, and Warren wrapped an arm around her waist to steady her. She leaned heavily against him, her exhaustion evident in every movement. They set off across the windswept grassland, Warren supporting much of Thelma's weight. Every step was a challenge, the uneven ground threatening to send them sprawling, but they pressed on, driven by the need to find safety and shelter.